Welcome back to the second part of our interview with James Burnie of gunnercooke. That is fascinating. Now, for those of us to get a little bit more technical about the different kind of products out there, you can't really move for headlines about stablecoins at the moment.
Yeah.
What are they? How do they differ from other types of coin? Is it a payment product, a financial instrument? Are they good or bad? Spill, James.
So stablecoins split a little bit. So just take a step back. When industry is seen as a bit dodgy or different, whatever, what you get is you get lots of things to rename things to try and make them feel better. So the very original origin of stablecoin was when the press kept slagging off crypto for being highly volatile, you'll lose all your money, and these guys turned and went, whoa, a second, this is a special token. This token won't lose you all your money, it's stable. So the origin of the word stablecoin was simply a marketing exercise put together by the crypto community to describe certain coins designed not to whiz up and down. They then looked at more and more how you actually stabilize these tokens. And a couple ideas were tested out. So one idea has been around purely algorithmic supply and demand. That is very much out of favor at the moment because some of those exploded spectacularly.
Can you explain algorithmic supply and demand?
So what you do is, let's take a step. You take Bitcoin. Bitcoin, there is a limited amount of Bitcoin in the world. It's like gold. It's designed intentionally to look like gold. That's why it's quarter mining and all the rest of it. So if you think gold, that's what the guys who created Bitcoin thought. The thing there is, the idea is there's like X amount of Bitcoin in the world. It's a fixed number. More and more people want to buy Bitcoin. As more and more people buy Bitcoin, it becomes more valuable. And that's where you get one group who say it's a scam because there's no intrinsic value. But then you argue gold is a scam because, again, gold does not really have an intrinsic value, even though we all sort of pretend it does. So whether you think it's a scam or not a scam is a trick of the human mind. And if we all believe it's not a scam, it bizarrely de facto becomes not a scam. And if we all believe it's a scam, it becomes de facto a scam. It's a slightly strange one. And the idea then is Bitcoin should go up all the way. And that is simply based on the idea that if you've got an asset, and let's just say there's a fixed number of that asset, and you get more and more people wanting to buy that asset will go up in value. It's the same with collectibles and all the rest of it. The idea of the algorithmic-based ones is what we'll do is we'll look at the number of buyers, we'll look at the number of sellers, and we will change the amount of stuff out there. So we'll buy it and we'll sell it ourselves to keep that at a certain level. So when more and more people want to come in, we go one way, effectively, to bring the price down. And when they go the other way, we put the price up to keep it within a sort of 2 bars. The blunt problem of those is that's all based on whether you can buy and sell it at the relevant levels all the time, and it just bluntly doesn't really work, so it kind of falls apart when put under times of extreme stress, because suddenly you've got everyone wanting out at the same moment. The buyers and the sellers suddenly get cold feet, and you get a spectacular crash, and that's where it's not impossible to do an argument once, but it's tricky. The next group are the ones who go, all right, well, what we'll do is we'll hold assets. Now, the asset holders split into 2 core groups. You get the asset holders, which the regulators are currently like at the well.
Are you talking about real world assets?
I'll go in a second. So you got one group where the asset is basically just money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take USDC, for every USDC token out there, there is $1 in a bank account. In theory, and it should work, if all of USDC tomorrow, everyone redeems, everyone can get their US dollars out the system. The advantage of that is it's a relatively stable system, provided that the US dollar amount in those accounts equals the amount out there.
But what's the point? Sorry to interrupt, but what's the point of it? If one of them is worth $1, yep, why not have $1?
Right, so there's a couple of reasons why you want to do it, and we're working with that people like TGBP at the moment for a UK equivalent because they've just launched. So one reason is the ability to transact in crypto asset transactions. So if you want to buy, so you mentioned real world assets, if you want to buy real world assets, if you want to do settlement, you can do it that way, effectively. Mm-hmm. You can automate the payments and you can't automate fiat. Second of all, much, much cheaper Forex. So we accept payments as law for in both USDC and US dollar. I prefer USDC. I get paid within 10 minutes and I pay about 50th of the price versus US dollar. I have to wait about a week and I get absolutely hammered in fees. So it's much cheaper way, a much faster way to do payments. The third way is you can program it. So, and again, this is where you get a bit more futuristic at the moment. But what you go is you go, look, when I do a piece of work, I get paid a percentage of what I charge. I have to trust the firm I work with that they will honour the amount which they say they'll honour, and I don't have a great level of oversight over that. If you set up a system where if you do when the invoice gets paid in crypto, it goes to something called a smart contract, which is basically automated code, which can be public. That smart contract will then split out all the relevant fees to the individual, the firm, and if you're going to go wild, tax authorities, the whole lot. So the whole thing's just paid on source immediately. You know it's public, you know exactly how much it is, you know exactly how it's working and all the rest of it. Effectively, you can start to really change how a whole lot of finance systems, all the rest of it work. Because at the moment, we are entirely dependent on trusting certain institutions. And yes, it works because they're regulated to high heaven, but this is a much, much cheaper way to bring back that level of trust where you can get rid of all the gumph effectively and just focus on the fact that this is just going to be automated. No one can mess with it. It just goes in, gets sorted, it comes out. You can check the code is public, it works.
So from what you're saying, this seems quite a sensible and efficient and cheaper way of carrying out transactions.
Yeah.
And just if you could get out your crystal ball, I would guess from what you're saying that in 10 to 20 years' time, everyone will be doing it.
Yeah, in 10 to 20 years, it'll be boring. The other thing is if you look at FTX, which everyone goes, FTX, evil, fell apart. But the solution to FTX was the blockchain, because there was no record keeping, there was no compliance, none of that. So how did you get the assets back? Well, the blockchain showed you where the assets went. So when we spoke to regulators, everyone thinks regulators are upset because FTX went down. Mm-hmm. It's the exact opposite. The issues at FTX are expected issues, the variety that the law has spent ages fixing, which they just ignored. The solutions were all new and new ways of doing it. So the success story of FTX is the fact it was a crypto company, ironically.
Yeah, that's really interesting what you say, because I think a lot of people in the street believe that one of the, and I say this in quote marks, benefits of crypto and the blockchain is its opacity. But what you seem to be saying is the absolute opposite. And in the case of FTX, everything was completely traceable through the blockchain.
Yeah, so you've got people can do things to make things opaque. The problem when you do something to make it opaque, it is clear you've done a thing to make it look opaque. So you know that there's a problem there when you get in the get-go, if you see what I mean. What you get is you split out your personal ID from your wallet ID. So what you get is you get a situation where people won't necessarily know it is I, James Burnie, who holds that crypto, unless that crypto goes to an exchange, someone does KYC. But they know that wallet has done those things and associated in that way. And to give you an idea of how transparent it gets, right? So, again, we were actually on a transaction, and £100,000 was being transferred in USDC. The issue we walked into was 8 transactions previously, £5 of the £100,000 may or may not have been associated with a wallet which was higher risk. Now, if you had paid that transaction in fiat, if you converted the crypto into fiat and moved that back into your account, no one would have ever known that this could have happened. The issue you've got now is you've got so much transparency in the room, you can go all the way back. Where do you stop? But if you want to get entertaining, the original creation of Bitcoin was an act of treason because it was creating an alternative currency. Some of the early use cases, things like child pornography, means that data is unfortunately still on the original Bitcoin blockchain. Therefore, you can argue that anyone who's ever spoken a blockchain, bought a blockchain in Bitcoin, has committed an act of treason because of the way the laws are drafted. And you can go all the way back to Genesis. So this entire presentation is an act of treason, arguably, if you take an extreme view of the rules, because it harks back to the original Bitcoin transaction. So we're now in a world, we previously had a world where, money laundering is a bad thing, we should do things to stop it, but there's a limit to what we can do. Now we're in the world of we can really do stuff, how far do you want to go? Because at the end of the day, like how far back should we be doing? We move to what we can do to what we should do. And that's a very uncomfortable conversation for lawyers and regulators, because the default option is, don't get out of bed, nothing can go wrong. If you see what I mean, that's clearly not the answer needed.
Yeah. You talked about the rules, and we are dealing here with products that are effectively borderless in the way they operate. You don't stop a Bitcoin at customs and fill in a form and then it can cross the channel. And yet we live in a world where most regulations are based on the nation state, or at least a group of nation states. So we have the EU with MiCA, we have the US, which is a bit confusing because some states are doing things on their own, but eventually I'm sure it will be sorted. Obviously we have the UK and we have other territories as well. Is it sustainable to have old school nation state legislation for this essentially borderless product?
Yeah, so we are seeing more and more coordination among regulators, and that's the way it's going to have to go if it's going to really work. So there's a couple of interesting ones, because when the web turned up as a thing originally, there's a group of people who did all sorts of things trying to argue that because it was on the internet, it wasn't in a country, and therefore they're out of scope. And there's a entertaining case in the US where an electron whizzes through an American copper wire. Mm-hmm. And on that basis, the Americans declared jurisdiction over the entire website because, look, one of their electrons have just entered US airspace, is almost how they put it. So what you get at the moment is, people think that because it's borderless, and if you want an extreme example, like in the UK, and we don't ever talk about this, but in the UK, a whole lot of things are blocked from Google. Same in China, which people talk more about with the Chinese wall. So states can push things off the internet altogether, so they can actually hit this kill switch. Just that, and except for like more recently, with more run events, people haven't really talked about it. And usually, things they kill are kind of no one's going to dispute the fact they should be taken off the internet. If you see what I mean, they're not really contentious things. So the other issue we've got in the room is the ability of people to go and hide somewhere. If you see what I mean, you've seen lately what's happened is the FT has taken criminal action against Huobi. And they've put in the public domain that despite the fact Huobi's entity is in Panama, the FCC have taken the court in the UK and got criminal action declared. The question then becomes is, what does Panama do about it? Because does Panama basically want to have the reputation, if you're a crook, come here and hide? Or does it go, I don't like this, I want to clean up my act? And we've seen before countries have a massive U-turn in terms of cleaning things up, because nobody really wants to be the country associated with being sort of the centre of fraud, corruption and bad things in the world.
I mean, Panama is viewed as being lightly regulated, isn't it?
Panama is on the light. It's not the least lightly regulated, but it's one of the less lightly regulated zones. But there are limits to what you can do in Panama. So the thing about Panama is Panama does not require KYC and AML for DeFi projects or any other projects. But you still got to buy sanctions law, which some people sort of forget in the haze, if you see what I mean. So there are still some rules, and it's always subject to change. So we're likely to see increasing coordination among regulators. And we've seen regulators in things like memorandum of understanding, deals and agreements, and so on. And some of it's also good. So, for example, Switzerland and the UK have entered into a deal to make it easier to cross-sell financial services between the two jurisdictions. So there's advantages in there, but it also means the hierarchical runaway side gets harder. And to give you an idea of how it can work in practice, right? So let's take the the communication rules. If you break those in your marketing, it is punishable by a 2-year custodial sentence and unlimited fine.
Wow.
You go, I don't care, I live abroad. Fine. But your bank, on the other hand, is now handling the proceeds of crime. So by putting out a public statement saying you're in breach, what the FCA has now done is the banking partners will see that and go, ooh, we don't want to handle the proceeds of crime. We're going to freeze all your accounts, freeze all your money till you get this sorted. So what you get is, if you do a runner, for want of a better way of putting it, your infrastructure gently falls apart, and then you come back, and now you're in a position where basically you've got your assets frozen. You now need to get that lifted, and the FCA can take as long as it needs to get happy with that, because it's under no rush, because as far as it's concerned, you gave it 2 fingers and disappeared. You're not considered one of the good guys at this point, if you see what I mean. And again, when you hit a certain size, Like, you need to get the regulators on side if you want your business to survive. If you think your business is going to be gone in 60 seconds, you can be a bit braver. But if you really want to have a sort of solid business which really makes money, at some point a regulator is going to wake up and you're going to want them on your side.
You and our viewers will know the role that some of the British overseas territories have played for decades in the traditional finance universe. I see that the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, is quite popular for crypto holding companies.
Yeah.
Why is that, and are there any drawbacks?
Sure. So the BVI traditionally is the least dodgy of the dodgy jurisdictions, probably the way to see it. So people tend to go to BVI for that purpose because it's dodgy enough to be cheap, but not so dodgy that everyone goes and cries in the corner on the legal and compliance side. Currently, and the BVI, where the BVI is restarted, it's been issuing your own token. Traditionally, has not been a regulated thing in the BVI, whereas say if you do it from the UK, it is quite highly regulated. The problem you've got is the BVI is basically opening up new laws at the moment, which will cause that to become a regulated activity. So the attractiveness, we think, is going to come off quite a lot when those new laws come in. The other issue you get is, bluntly, what you're getting the lawyer problem at the moment, which is the lawyers look at their own jurisdiction, obsess over that, and don't think more strategically. And your problem at the moment is you set up in the BVI, fine. You sell your token. You can do that in the BVI, unregulated, fine. Apart from, you can't sell into Europe because of MICA. And there's an alpha reverse solicitation before people try and argue that one. You can't sell into UK because of FinProm. Technically, for the US, you've still actually got the Biden rules, but the Americans are so busy trying to work out what they want to do, who knows. But at the end of the day, you would expect a blocker on the US. So you create a wonderful company, which as long as you never sell a token to anybody, it's fantastic. And that's where we are moving people away from the BVI a little bit in terms of being seen as kind of, this is the answer to all of life's problems. Mm-hmm. The next issue you walk into...
So what is the answer to all of life's problems?
Yeah,
within this sector, I mean, not literally all of life's problems.
42. So you've got to realize at first, the world has become pay to play. That's the way to see it. So the question now is you want a business which can sell to a jurisdiction at a cheap number. Now, we can then split out the jurisdiction. So if we've got a bit of a magic trick is the short answer. So if you go down the standard route of Europe, they will tell you to get a MICA license. The cheapest jurisdiction is probably Malta at the moment, and that costs you about 150,000 euros to get a Malta license. The magic trick is Germany. Nobody ever thinks of Germany, but it's got one huge advantage, which is something called German fronting. And the way that works is you basically, if you know the right people in Germany, you can basically get a white label solution in, which means you piggyback on someone else's license, and that brings the cost down spectacularly to something in the low tens of thousands rather than 150, and it's more of a one-off payment. The issue with Germany is if you're a security token, Germany tax-free. If you're a utility token, German tax and profits can be up to 19%. And second of all, you are now in a grown-up country, so KYC, AML, those boxes need to be ticked. But if you do that stunt, you basically get access to the whole of the EU. And then the other thing to be wary of that one is the EU does not like the BVI particularly at all. So you'll probably need a subsidiary in the EU. And again, there's ways to do that cheaply. But that is probably the cheapest route to a large population. The UK is currently in transition. So you can do things like get sign-offs to send to UK and all the rest of it. But that entire regime is going to go by the end of 2027. So if you want to send the UK, as currently written, you would need to get a direct license from the FCA to do so. That would cost something in the hundreds of thousands of pounds all in, because you need a local MRO, you need statistical controls and all the rest of it. We are working on lobbying currently to create something not the same as Germany because it's under the UK system, but an equivalent system in the UK to try and get companies in that what we call a appointed representative regime in the UK. But on paper at the moment, it's not happening, but we're lobbying. We're getting a lot of people in the crypto industries supporting us, trying to push that forwards because that's what we do in traditional equity. Why not do it for crypto effectively? So the UK is very much in flux. The one thing I would say, though, is the FCA is very much open to conversation. It realizes its rules are new. It realizes the difficulty around it. So the FCA is despite the press, it's a very willing regulator to try and get the industry. It wants the industry to do well. It wants to make it happen. But it is the policeman, so it will want you to comply with the standard rules, the standard level which you would get across the UK. It wants you to meet the same standards. So it's saying, it's saying the same outcome is the mantra, but basically they're going to force you to act like an FCA authorized firm at the end of the day, with the caveat that if you go, this is a bit different in crypto, they're open to that, and there's things like the FCA sandbox where they'll do it and the like. And then America is, who knows? Because technically, at the moment, this is what everyone's forgetting, is technically you've still got Biden rules where everything is legal, run by regulators who are unfunded, with a basic movement where if you create enough noise, action, and jobs, no American politician would dare close down the industry. That's the game being played in the US. So you build so much and make so much money, the Americans daren't take it apart when the next guy comes in. But technically, if Trump got hit by a bus tomorrow and the new guy came up and he was just like Biden, you'd have Biden rules straight away because that's what's currently in play.